Something that Aquanow announced just a few days ago is that we successfully helped Emirates NBD's Live app integrate crypto onto its platform. And so they're now starting to trade. Pretty big industry moment, actually. I'm really proud of the team here.
My guest today is Sebastian, who is the researcher for Aquanow, which is a crypto financial service platform. Sebastian, welcome back to the show.
Hey, man, thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure. Things are not looking great right now in markets, right? Let's just kind of address the elephant in the room. What do you make of the overall sentiment right now?
The cliche is that markets hate uncertainty. And the new kind of regime that the new U.S. administration is trying to usher in is a total departure of what we've seen for like decades and decades. Something that's happened more recently is, Trump is saying like the stock market's a bad gauge. We're taking a longer time frame. That's again kind of different from what we've seen in recent administrations, including Trump's last administration, where it seemed like the stock market performance was something that people were that the administration was focused on as a barometer for whether or not they were doing a good job. And that's now off the table, right? And so I think in that instance, that's just going to cause a little bit of a degrossing, I guess. So people just would, take exposure off the table and wait and see for how that shakes out. And crypto is famously the fastest horse in the race, and it's led to the downside. It's experienced, steeper losses than in traditional markets. But the more longer tail assets, like, I don't know, maybe some of these AI coins or like, Berachain or whatever else, like they had a move, but they, like their overall kind of like drawdown seems a bit more muted than some of what we've seen at some of the major tokens. And, that might be an indication of a bottoming process here.
Usually Bitcoin is, those that are in crypto are wanting it to be a flight to safety, although the news about tariffs and what's been unfolding is showing otherwise. What are you seeing in terms of this whole flight to safety narrative for Bitcoin trying to be gold?
So obviously, like, Bitcoin's had a bit of a rough go, but the trend is nice and upwards, unbroken to the upside. And then the number of tokenized gold holders, as evidenced by like Tether's XAUT, has gone parabolic recently. And so it's interesting because Bitcoin tries to have this narrative of like digital gold. And I do think that holds true over longer time horizons, like if you zoom out. But in the short term here, we've seen that even within the digital economy, like the tokenized world where people are happy to swap with like, assets on chain, the demand for this tokenized gold product has kind of hung in there much better than for Bitcoin. So
now, despite the craziness that's happening in the crypto markets, I think there's things that are happening on chain that paint a different picture. What are you seeing in terms of some bullish news that's happening on chain?
I think some of the more interesting narratives that we're seeing is, we had financial results for the year end 2024 come out last month, and both Coinbase and Robinhood, for example, showed very well. And they talked a lot about tokenization. Of course, BlackRock's been, very adamant about this kind of theme. And I think it's pretty interesting to see that the tokenized assets of their tokenized treasury fund, BUIDL, you can use to kind of like set new records, not a huge amount, 600 million, so it's reasonable, but then it's kind of gone cross chain recently. And so we've seen, Avalanche and Aptos take a decent chunk of Polygon, and then, Arbitrum and Optimism as well. So it's neat to see BlackRock kind of double down on this thesis and go kind of like multi-chain on this. The specific blockchains that are there might be indicative of like stronger, BD efforts from those groups or not. I don't know. Like maybe they paid for that. It's hard to say, but nevertheless, it's a good trend. And I think this chart here like was one that I don't think a single financial executive didn't see or hasn't been kind of like tapped on the shoulder about since Robinhood posted results at the late last month. So like options tend to be favored asset class amongst trading desks right now because they have more opportunity for spread, structured products, so on and so forth. And so there's a little bit more opportunity to make money than like on your standard bid ask or trading fees or what have you on like classic equities. Robinhood famously, has a payment for order flow model as well. So needless to say, as you see for the longest time, options trading activity was their most lucrative. And then with the acquisition of Bitstamp, that was expected to change. However, like the degree to which crypto now dominates their revenue picture, or at least did, in Q4, is staggering, and I like, this is something that Aquanow's executives, try to impart on financial executives when they meet, and trying to pitch our Aquanow's like integration services in terms of like trying to get some of these traditional financial houses to enable crypto trading on their platforms, is that, a lot of a lot of their clients of traditional financial institutions, banks, brokerage houses, are already trading crypto elsewhere. And so, but they, of course, like to do that under a unified front, especially one with a good UI, like Robinhood's kind of famous for and stuff like that. So now that they have this ability to do more of this, you see this massive revenue increase. And something that Aquanow announced just a few days ago is that we successfully helped Emirates NBD's Live app integrate crypto onto its platform. And so they're now starting to trade live as well. It's a pretty big industry moment, actually. I'm really proud of the team here for having, accomplished this meaningful integration. And I think it'll kind of be part of a broader theme. I think this particular chart is very meaningful. It's like a huge step change. And I think, our integration with Emirates NBD and Live is kind of indicative of this kind of same trend continuing on. It's I know there's blood in the streets in terms of token prices and stuff like that, but the commentary from Robinhood's CEO was very bullish in terms of crypto and like tokenization and just how much more efficient they can be in that side of their business and how they're wanting to grow that sleeve. And since then, we've heard other bank CEOs in various conferences and stuff like that mention similar type of bullish trends. Once regulations are a bit more clear, we definitely want to do this. And, in the case of Emirates NBD and Aquanow in the UAE, there is a more favorable, business-friendly, established regulatory regime there for digital assets. And so that was an area where the banks are able to move a bit faster. And they want to. And so I do think that you start to see the pieces of the puzzle come together, and it's this is going to be a huge trend over the coming quarters.
And from a macro perspective, we're getting at one narrative, but what's actually happening behind the scenes is like a completely different narrative.
Look, there's a lot going on in the markets right now. But with respect to crypto in particular, there's no shortage of tweets to this effect on Twitter, where it's like people talking about the U.S. announces a strategic Bitcoin reserve. The Office of the Comptroller of the Currency says that banks no longer have to get permission effectively to deal with crypto entities, and so on and so forth. These are insanely bullish headlines. But because there's this broader kind of oh wait, what's going on with this tariff thing and slowing momentum of stock and risk asset prices, specifically ones that are correlated to U.S. equities, and that it's that comes off. But meanwhile, behind the scenes, there's really interesting stuff happening. Looking on chain for another example of that is at Aquanow, we track the benchmark interest rates earned from supplying stablecoins, in this case USDC and USDT, to the largest, most institutional grade lending pools in DeFi. And we take a weighted average and kind of track this over time. And for us, it's kind of a benchmark for if you're investing in the digital asset space, you should at least be earning this rate. This would be the opportunity cost of capital in digital assets. If you've got money on chain, it should at least be earning this. But in addition to that, it's got a number of interesting kind of read-throughs. You can try to gauge market sentiment, and there's different instances where you can kind of point to that in the past. But what's been really interesting is that since January, this rate has just been down only. And initially, I kind of had thought that this is pretty bearish, in the sense that typically that might point to an indication of supply and demand in these loan markets weakening. And then in addition to that, we can see that this rate can be somewhat correlated to the crypto asset prices as well. And that makes sense, right? If people are trying to borrow, a lot of that borrowing tends to be for leverage purchases, and so it kind of tends to be linked to that. And so with the rate coming down so much, and then the crypto prices as of end of the month not having come down that much, I was like, ooh, this might be a bit risky. Maybe that's proven to be prescient, hard to say, but nevertheless, it was something that was quite interesting. And as I started to look into it, I found I kind of uncovered something, another one of those sneakily bullish happenings in the space, where despite the fact that the rates had gone down, which might indicate a supply and demand imbalance, loans outstanding, sure, they've come off a little bit in February, but they're near all-time highs, and certainly recent year highs. And activity in those chain for these lending pools is also bounced back off of the recent lows and printed a positive reading in February. So that's weird. You'd think that if the rate being lower would be indicative of people closing loans or a lack of demand, but actually, as we know, stable coins have set all-time highs recently in dollars minted, I guess. And you see that in February, again, the average stablecoin supply printed a new high. And so actually what's happening is that a lot of these new stablecoins that are being minted are going into these DeFi lending pools to earn a savings rate, which is a pretty good trade, I think, right? Like if you think about it, you're getting similar to treasury yield interest rate on that savings, with the optionality that, like, if crypto comes back in a big way, that rate will increase. And so I think it's a pretty good, delta neutral trade or market neutral trade. But you can see, like, again, since January of 2025, the utilization rate in these pools has just gone way down. But we saw that, like, the loan balances aren't going down. It's actually just like tons of new capital coming in. And so, like, to me, that's super bullish. Absolute ton of new capital come on chain, and it's currently sitting in DeFi pools, which will make it a bit cheaper for people to borrow for leverage trading down the road, or maybe once sentiment improves, that money will go elsewhere for additional trading opportunities or something like that.
The altcoins have been just getting hammered. I mean, day after day, all I see is just nothing but red. What are you seeing in terms of some of when you go down the market cap and some of these altcoins?
One of the things I thought was interesting, I'd seen that Aptos had like a pretty interesting like rise in user activity. I hadn't heard many positive things about Aptos, and so I kind of looked at the difference between it and Sui, because Sui had like this like up only mode for a while there. Both had done pretty well, but obviously like Sui had done quite a bit better. The ratio of Sui TVL to Aptos TVL trended towards parity now, so there's not a huge difference there. And yet the token price held on to a lot of its outperformance. So that's just an interesting potential long-short trade. Both are move-based projects. There's definitely not financial advice, but that could be something for sure to keep an eye on. And then Sonic, is the Phantom rebrand. I think Andre Cronje had a really good reputation by and large in the space, and was certainly like a pretty prolific builder, and kind of came back with this new project. And TVL has just gone straight up in a very impressive manner. And then, like a lot of new launching tokens, the Sonic, token had a period of weakness, found its footing, and then has now started to rise. And then one thing that's important to note, its difference between market cap and fully diluted valuation is pretty minimal. The market cap is, call it like three and a bit times the total value locked. And so, depending on how you look at things, that might be a little bit rich, hard to say, right? TVL could still increase quite a bit, but it's, maybe pricing in some additional upside for sure in that metric. But all that to say is, pretty good launch so far. A lot of good things happening there. A lot of people excited about that ecosystem. And then like another one that I'm on record as, being pretty positive on is Berachain. So they had a really successful kind of like pre-farm, I guess, of TVL in Boyco. And so they've held on quite nicely, with over $3 billion in TVL. Their launch in February was contentious, to say the least. Of course, like, it's a pretty bifurcating name, I think. And a lot of people were calling for it to go straight to zero and so on and so forth, which we know kind of hasn't happened. If you look at its fully diluted valuation of about $3 billion versus its total value locked, it's 1-to-1. It's trading at 1-to-1 TVL to fully diluted valuation. How does that stack up versus Sonic's kind of like 3 and a bit fully diluted valuation to TVL ratio? So anyway, it's just something to keep an eye on. There's never any shortage of really interesting opportunities. I like both of those ecosystems, just to be clear. But yeah, just on a valuation basis, maybe Bera's a little bit more interesting here. But yeah, so those are some of the altcoin opportunities that I've been kind of keeping an eye on.
Sebastian, you put out this report every single month, and you go way in depth. We love seeing them. Where can people sign up for this newsletter and get access to the report?
You can go to aquanow.substack.com, and that's more of our long form blog post style newsletter. For these charts in particular, they're at aqndigital. .substack.com, and that's just like the asset management subsidiary of Aquanow. I tend to focus more of my attention there, but I do the content on both sides.
Perfect. We'll be sure to include the links in the description. Sebastian, thanks so much. And if you enjoyed this video, please like the video, subscribe, give it a share, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.